Hi everyone, this is me. This is the first in our advanced U.S. history, AP U.S. history videos. I know I promised I'd start to do more of these. I've done them before for my other classes, but it's kind of taken me a while to get the resources ready for the AP classes. But this is the first one with the French and Indian War. Mainly the reason why I did this is that we are kind of pressed for time as far as reading and getting ready for those quizzes. So I understand that chapter 6 is going to be kind of hard to get all the reading in. That's why I'm going to produce this to kind of supplement that. However, these videos can only be 15 minutes long, so we need to go ahead and jump right on in there. All right, so this is going to be on the French and Indian War. The time period we're talking about 1754 to 1763. A lot of that's happening in the early part of it. It's going to mainly be 1754, 1759, and then the last 3 years are really just waiting around for the peace agreement. The French are already defeated. Whoops, I gave away the end. All right, let's jump into it. All right, so early French exploration is starting about the same time as English exploration. They're just going to Canada. So 1608, 1 year after Jamestown, Samuel de Champlain founds Quebec City. Quebec is going to be the largest of the French cities in Canada. The other one's Montreal. Outside of that, not that much settlement as far as towns. 1673, Jacques Marquette and Joliet. They're going to map the Mississippi River. 10 years later, a guy named the Cavalier de La Salle is going to get all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. He buries a cross and some coins, and he claims the Mississippi Delta for France, which would make Spain ticked off, but they're doing pretty good in Mexico. They really haven't tried to get into the Louisiana area yet. These early French settlers, oh, that got hidden by the picture. Um, we're going to be known as de Bois or voyageurs. Coureurs de Bois means runners of the woods, and the voyageurs are going to be the thing that separates them. Coureurs de Bois are going to be more of the guys walking through the woods. They're going to be these fur trappers. The voyageurs are going to be the ones exploring, and they're usually going to use the waterways, so they're going to be traveling by canoes. The French have a really good relationship with the natives, and they're going to help them out whenever they can. All right, goals for this settlement or exploration in the New World for France. One is beaver pelts. That's the biggest thing. It's not necessarily gold because you're not going to find that in Canada, but beaver pelts are going to be valuable. They're waterproof, they're beautiful, they make great coats, great hats. Everybody in Europe wants them, so that's what we're trying to get. Converts, they're trying to spread Catholicism to these new lands. So another one of the big groups of people traveling to New France, other than the Coureurs de Bois and Voyageurs, are going to be the fathers, the Catholic Jesuit priests are also going to be traveling as well. All right, so getting into how French settlement differed from English settlement. One, the French are going to the north, the St. Lawrence River into Canada, so they're starting in the north. They're spreading to the south along the riverways. They're going to go to the Great Lakes, then they're going to go to the Mississippi River and spread down to the Gulf Coast. However, they're not settling in large numbers. They're not there to occupy land. Again, their number one reason for being there is the beaver pelts. They don't need to occupy the land. Actually, they can work out a great working relationship with the natives. Right? Who's going to be able to shoot more beavers in a day? Right? The natives who know the land or these French guys? Definitely the natives, so why not let them do it? So we can get this trading relationship going, which pleases the natives as well. Catholic priests are going to be attempting to convert the natives, and the biggest part about this is that they're actually going to learn the language and actually going to learn the customs of the Huron, the Micmac, the Wyand, ooh, I forgot the name, the Shawnee. All these native tribes they're coming in contact with, they're actually going to learn the language and learn their customs because they're trying to get them to embrace Catholicism. So they have to put it in terms that they understand. The other thing is the forts that they're building are going to be small. The natives are actually going to be invited into those forts, because those forts are going to be mainly storehouses for the ammunition, for the guns, for the pelts, for the alcohol. These trade goods that are flowing back and forth. They're kind of seen, one, defensively to stake a claim, but ultimately they're there to facilitate this beaver trade. This is definitely opposed to the British way of doing things, which is that they are settling, they're occupying, they're farming. That takes land. So if they're coming in and gaining land, that means the natives are losing that land, which isn't going to make them happy at all. There's going to be a lot more conflict there. It's a very few native allies for the English, a whole bunch for the French. All right, they're not going to try to convert the natives. They're just trying to push them out of the way. They are going to have some small praying towns. You should have seen that in chapter 5. But for the most part, they're just trying to move them out of the way. And the forts are going to be more defensive. They're there to protect the English western settlements from these French depredations, from the natives as well, these raids that are going on. Whoops, another picture in the way. Alright, let me shrink that for a second. Alright, previous Anglo-French wars. This isn't the first one. There's been a couple. King William's War, Queen Anne's War, earlier in the 1700s, late 1600s. These are just extensions of European wars. This is kind of like a sideshow. This isn't the main fight. But the biggest things that come out of these two wars, one, Britain is going to gain a foothold in Canada. They're going to get Nova Scotia. They're going to get Newfoundland. They're going to get the area around the Hudson Bay. And then there's also going to be ramped up tensions because natives come in and they just take over towns and put people to the hatchet. Deerfield, Massachusetts, Schenectady, New York are going to be two of the most famous raids during these wars. But again, these are kind of sideshows to larger wars in Europe. That's what's going to be different about the French and Indian War. The main theater in the French and Indian War is going to be in North America. Again, got to move some of this around. Alright, the Huron versus Iroquois. Another thing that's going on, we talked about the French and the English rivalry, but there's another one going on within the native community as well. The Iroquois Confederacy, the 5 nations, 6 nations of the Iroquois, the Seneca, the Cayuga, the Onondaga, the Oneida, the Tuscarora, and the Mohawk are this pretty strong, powerful confederacy in western New York and kind of northwestern Pennsylvania. They're being opposed by their ancient enemies, the Wyandot of the Huron, who are on basically the other side of Lake Erie in Canada. They're fighting over beaver furs, they're fighting over hunting lands, and they're kind of playing the French and English off of each other. The Iroquois have changed sides many times in the past 100 years. But this time they're going to join up with the British, mainly because their ancient enemies are helping the French. And the territory we're talking about with them is up in this area, right around Fort Frontenac. Now, the biggest part that sparks this war is right here, this place called Fort Duquesne. Western Pennsylvania, the Ohio River Valley, this fertile valley that connects the Mississippi River up here into the northeast of our country. Very rich in hunting land, a lot of beaver, a lot of deer. If you control that land, you control millions of dollars worth of furs. So the French are moving down from up here in Quebec, and they're going to start fortifying their border of their claim. So one of these is going to be Fort Frontenac. The biggest one is going to be, or the most important one is Fort Duquesne. And the reason for that is it's at the forks of the Ohio. The Allegheny, the Monongahela come together and form the Ohio. So if you can build a fort down in this point, you can control trade up the Allegheny, down the Ohio, and up the Monongahela. They are going to be able to beat the English to the punch. The English want to build a fort there too, but they're going to get there first. They build this fort right here. This is Google Maps. You can search Pittsburgh, zoom in on the point, and you can see the outline of Fort Duquesne right there. So the French had built it. The English aren't happy about that because they kind of beat them to the punch. Now, if you notice over here, you kind of see the outline of a much larger fort. We'll talk about that one in a little while. We're not there yet. All right. So once the British find out that the French have fortified at Duquesne, had the forts of the Ohio, Virginia has claimed this land as well. They've claimed the Ohio River Valley. So the governor is going to send out George Washington, who's only 21 years old right now. He's really young, kind of ambitious. He wants to become a British officer. They send him to dislodge the French. He goes up there with a small force to push them. He doesn't necessarily understand how much Fort Duquesne's been fortified, but before he even gets there, he's going to get into a skirmish with a diplomatic detachment from the French. Doesn't necessarily understand what they're doing there, but there's an attack. His forces are going to kill a significant amount of them. They're going to capture the rest. Now, he's captured a French officer, a guy named Jumonville. One of his Iroquois allies, a guy named the Half King, is basically going to come up to him, take a hatchet right to the head, executing him right on the spot. That's important for later. But Washington knows that he doesn't necessarily have enough strength to take out Fort Duquesne. He builds a small, and we're talking about a ridiculously small fort. I mean, it's pitiful. It's about the size of our room. Called Fort Necessity. His native allies don't want to die in that little excuse for a fort, so they leave. Later, Washington's going to be surrounded by French and native forces, and he's forced to surrender, and he has to sign a document saying that he is responsible for the assassination of Jumonville, which sparks the French and Indian War. So now we have a full-on war. Britain's going to commit more troops to the field, including a guy named Edward Braddock. He is a British officer. He's bringing British regular troops to the fight. He doesn't respect the colonial militia. He doesn't want to fight a guerrilla war. He really believes in these line battles. You line up shoulder to shoulder, might on might, duke it out. So he thinks he can take Duquesne by sheer force. Marches out there. He's caught in a battle in the middle of the woods. He's surrounded on three sides by the French and mainly Huron and Shawnee braves, and they're just picking off officers. One of the officers that's going to be picked off is him. All right. And this kind of highlights that there is a tension between the British officers, or the commanders of the British regulars, and this colonial militia. Colonial militia don't necessarily like the British officers because they believe the British officers don't understand this North American type of warfare, and they really want to be led by their captains. However, the British will not allow any colonials to rise higher than captains. So George Washington cannot become general in the British Army. It's not going to happen. Right? And it's also going to be about different war aims too. The militias are more concerned about the Indians. The British are definitely more concerned about the French. Robert Rogers and his Rangers. He's a Massachusetts man. He's going to become famous during the French and Indian War because he's going to take his militia. They're going to be known for their lightning strikes against native groups. All right. Albany Plan of Union. I'm quickening up because I only got a minute. All right. This is going to be an early plan for the colonies to come together under one government. It's proposed by Ben Franklin. They get together. A lot of the northern colonies get together. They come up with this plan where there's going to be one president and general and an assembly that's going to kind of be this overarching government for all of the colonies. Britain says, we ain't agreeing to this. This is going to be too much freedom. The colonists are concerned about that president and general. We're not going to be able to finish up. We're going to have an addendum, a short one here in a second, that's going to finish up this lecture. We only got about a half a minute left.